Have you ever wondered why some people walk through chaos without flinching, why the world collapses around them, yet their pulse does not tremble, why panic consumes the masses, but leaves a chosen few untouched, as if they have swallowed a secret the rest of humanity fears to even articulate? It is not bravery, it is not divine protection, it is not luck, nor is it destiny, nor some mystical inner peace stolen from ancient wisdom. It is simply this: they understand the game. And when you understand the game, you do not panic, because you see reality not as a storm but as a map. You do not hear noise, you hear patterns. You do not drown in emotion, you ride it like a knife cutting through the soft flesh of illusion. You do not fear people, because you finally recognize what they are: malleable, predictable, often blind to themselves. And it is in that blindness that your vision becomes power. Machiavelli understood this long before you or I ever dared to speak it aloud. He understood that human beings are not guided by reason, but by forces buried so deeply in their instincts that their rational mind merely decorates their impulses with pretty explanations. He understood that panic is the child of ignorance, and ignorance is the preferred state of the masses. He understood that fear is the currency of power, that perception is the battlefield, that loyalty is a fragile illusion but the appearance of loyalty is a weapon. He understood that the world is governed not by morality, but by momentum, and by those who know how to shape it. And he understood, above all, that the few who learn to see the world without the comforting filters of hope or fairness become the ones who quietly rule it. You feel the pulse of these truths already, don't you? Something in you pulses with a dark recognition, a sensation like footsteps echoing in a long hallway you've walked before in dream. You sense the presence of something forbidden, a realization that the world is not designed for the honest, the emotional, or the easily shaken. It is built for the cold, the observant, the strategic, the ones who can sit in a burning room and inhale the smoke as if they are tasting the future. And maybe you are beginning to see that you have been taught to fear your own potential for such vision. You are taught to panic whenever the world destabilizes. You are taught to conform, to seek comfort, to wait for someone stronger to provide order. But the truth is far more ruthless. Order belongs to those who create it, and creation requires the courage to see the world as it is, not as you wish it to be. Imagine a man standing in the center of a city crumbling under political upheaval. Others run, others scream, others cling to promises made by leaders who have already abandoned them. But this man stands still, his face unreadable, his breath steady, his eyes tracing not the panic, but the trajectories of power shifting like shadows, repositioning themselves at dusk. He sees who is gaining influence and who is losing it. He sees which alliances are rotting from inside. He sees which promises were fraudulent from the second they were spoken. He sees who will be desperate tomorrow and who will pretend confidence tonight. And in that calculation he is not frozen. He is choosing his next move, one that will look like instinct to everyone else, but is born from clarity. That man is Machiavellian, not because he manipulates people, but because he refuses to be manipulated by the illusions that dominate them. And this is what you must understand if you wish to wield the same inner stillness. Panic exists only when you mistake the surface for the structure. Panic grows when you interpret uncertainty as danger rather than opportunity. Panic thrives when you assume others think, feel, or act with the same logic you do. But Machiavelli tears these assumptions out by their roots. He replaces them with a cold awareness that people are drawn to strength and repelled by fear, that they obey perception more than truth, and that the world rewards those who can shape emotions, both their own and others. Think of every moment in your life when panic overtook you. The uncertainty before a major decision, the confusion when someone betrayed you, the fear of losing something you believed you needed. Every one of those sensations came from a single root. You felt powerless. And you felt powerless because you had no map. But what if you did? What if you could dissect every human interaction until motives became transparent? What if you could stand inside chaos and see the architecture of it? What if you could walk into conflict not as a participant, but as an observer holding the strings behind the curtain? You begin to understand why Machiavelli's teachings feel like forbidden knowledge. They strip you of illusions you've been trained to rely on. They replace comforting lies with uncomfortable truths. They show you that people are not nearly as complex as they pretend to be, that most are driven by fear, pride, desire, and insecurity, that their behavior is a series of predictable reactions masquerading as free will. When you understand the game, You see that power is not a prize but a process, a continuous negotiation between what things appear to be and what they truly are. And once you see this, panic loses its grip on you. Picture yourself in a room full of people. At first glance, it is ordinary. Conversation, laughter, subtle movements, shared glances. But once you adopt Machiavelli's vision, the room transforms. You no longer see people, you see strategies, you see alliances hinted through body language, rivalries hiding beneath polite exchanges, insecurities exposed through tone and posture. You see who wants approval, who fears rejection, who pretends confidence they do not possess. You see who is positioning themselves socially, professionally, psychologically. You see desires simmering beneath every word spoken. And as you watch this silent dance of human need, you realize you are no longer part of the crowd. You have moved above it. And when you are above it, panic has no oxygen. This is the essence of understanding the game, replacing emotion with observation, replacing reaction with reading, replacing frantic motion with stillness. You do not eliminate fear. You master its direction. You do not reject emotion, you weaponize it. You do not become heartless, you become intentional. Panic is the mind gripping illusions so tightly that it shatters itself. Understanding is the mind releasing illusions until only the truth remains. And truth, stripped of its comforting mask, is the most stable foundation you will ever stand on. Machiavelli believed that those who seek to lead, influence, or simply survive must cultivate a rare internal condition, the ability to remain composed in the presence of uncertainty, because uncertainty is not an enemy, it is the birthplace of power. Every shift in the world, every collapse of order, every flicker of chaos opens a door that most people are too frightened to touch. But when you understand that the game is not about certainty but about leverage, that door becomes a threshold into advantage. Think of the moments in history where leaders emerged not because they were gifted, but because they were the only ones who did not panic. While others froze, they observed. While others collapsed under emotional weight, they calculated. While others begged for stability, they shaped it. The ones who remain calm in chaos automatically rise because calmness itself becomes a display of dominance. People look for certainty outside themselves. If you can become that certainty, you become their center of gravity. To understand the game is to understand human weakness not with contempt, but with clarity. You begin to see how often people operate in contradiction to their stated values. You see how their decisions are not shaped by logic, but by pressures they barely acknowledge. You see how loyalty forms not from virtue but from need. You see how quickly morality dissolves under fear. And once you internalize this, the world becomes predictable. Not stable, but predictable. Not safe, but readable. And predictability is the antidote to panic. Now imagine you walk into a crisis. People are arguing, emotions collide like storms breaking across the walls, uncertainty hangs in the air like smoke. Most people react emotionally, escalating tension, contributing to chaos with their fear. But you, because you understand the game, feel your mind slowing rather than racing. Your instinct is to step back mentally, to observe the forces in play. You do not speak immediately. Silence is your reconnaissance. You track who feels threatened, who wants control, who seeks validation, who is posturing to protect their image. You watch which statements are strategic and which are emotional outbursts. You listen not to words, but to motives, and as you watch, panic does not arise. In fact, you feel the opposite, the subtle ignition of advantage. Because chaotic environments reveal truth, stable environments hide, and you are no longer afraid of truth. Machiavelli teaches you that a person who cannot analyze human nature cannot control it, and a person who cannot control it will always panic because they are always at the mercy of forces they do not understand. Panic is the symptom of a mind that has surrendered its ability to interpret reality. But when you reclaim that ability, when you dissect the anatomy of behavior, when you trace the contours of power dynamics, panic becomes impossible. You may feel adrenaline, but not fear. You may feel intensity, but not paralysis. You may experience uncertainty, but not collapse. Your mind becomes the still point around which events rotate. The game then is not about domination for its own sake. It is about clarity. It is about understanding the psychological mechanics that drive both yourself and others. It is about recognizing that emotions are signals but not commands, that panic is an invitation to pause, that uncertainty is the canvas on which influence is painted. And once this becomes your internal reality, the world transforms from a battlefield into a chessboard, and you, once a frightened pawn, become something far more dangerous. Think of the people who thrive, quietly, persistently, without spectacle. They do not chase validation. They do not expose their vulnerability. They do not reveal their strategy. They operate in the shadows of perception, adjusting their moves with precision, calibrating their reactions, shaping impressions, choosing when to withdraw and when to strike. They do not panic because their mind is always 2 or 3 steps ahead, anticipating outcomes before others even realize outcomes exist. They do not hope for stability, they construct it. They do not seek fairness, they navigate reality. When you understand the game, you begin to see how often people sabotage themselves by surrendering to the first wave of emotion. They panic because they believe the moment defines them, because they imagine the worst-case scenario as inevitable, because they allow their identity to be shaped by fear instead of strategy. But you, now awakening to Machiavelli's vision, begin to break this cycle. You begin to treat fear as data, not as destiny. You begin to treat setbacks as openings rather than defeats. You begin to treat uncertainty as a negotiation with time, power, and perception. There is a moment, subtle yet profound, when a person crosses from emotional living to strategic living. It is not dramatic. It is not cinematic. It is quiet, internal, a shift in awareness so deep that others may never detect it. But you will feel it. The moment you understand the game, your mind stops trembling. Your reactions slow, your decisions sharpen. You begin to sense the invisible wires connecting people's words to their fears, their actions to their ambitions, their silence to their secrets. You become less reactive, more observant, less volatile, more deliberate. The world no longer feels like a threat. It becomes a negotiation. And this internal shift is irreversible. Once you see the structure behind the chaos, you cannot unsee it. Once you understand why people behave as they do, you stop expecting them to behave otherwise. Once you no longer expect the world to be fair or predictable, you stop feeling betrayed when it isn't. Panic thrives on shattered expectations. Understanding dissolves expectations. When you understand the game, you do not panic because there is nothing left to panic about, only variables to navigate, only strategies to refine, only opportunities to exploit. This is the doorway Machiavelli invites you through, a darker understanding, a deeper awareness, a colder clarity that allows you to walk through fire without burning, to move through manipulation without being manipulated, to see through deception without becoming blind to your own. You do not panic because you have entered the realm where panic cannot survive. You have stepped into the architecture of power, and the moment you step in, the world becomes something new, something sharper, something honest, something entirely under your command. The moment you begin to peel away the illusions that shield the average mind from the machinery of human behavior, you feel a quiet shift inside you, not dramatic like thunder splitting the sky, but subtle, like a door slowly closing behind you with the soft certainty that you will never return to who you were before. Understanding the game does not simply calm you. It reshapes the architecture of your perception. It rearranges the hierarchy of your fears. It sharpens your senses to nuances most people are blind to. It makes you aware of the forces within yourself that have been steering you unconsciously, and it reveals the forces in others that they themselves cannot see. And once you begin to perceive these forces, you begin to sense how the world actually operates, not by fairness, not by virtue, not by rationality, but by power dynamics, so old they predate language. Machiavelli knew that once a person recognizes these patterns, they awaken to a new kind of vision. This vision isn't mystical, nor is it cruel for cruelty's sake. It's simply honest. It sees the world as a series of negotiations between strength and weakness, between appearance and reality, between desire and restraint, between fear and ambition. And in every negotiation, someone wins and someone loses. The ones who panic lose by default. The ones who understand the game choose when and how to act. They choose the terrain, the timing, the presentation. They choose what emotions to express and what emotions to hide. They choose which battles matter and which battles are meant to distract the untrained. Imagine yourself sitting across from someone, a colleague, a partner, a friend, a rival, Someone whose presence once made your stomach tighten. Their confidence used to intimidate you. Their tone used to unsettle you. Their unpredictability used to pull you into spirals of overthinking where you drowned in possibilities and feared the worst long before anything happened. But now, with Machiavellian clarity, the room feels different. You feel anchored rather than destabilized. Their confidence is no longer a threat but a facade you can analyze. Their words are no longer weapons but signals. Their unpredictability is no longer chaos, but a pattern waiting to be deciphered. You are no longer pulled into their gravity. They are pulled into yours, because understanding the game gives you something devastatingly powerful: emotional distance. Not coldness, not apathy, but distance. The ability to observe emotions without drowning in them, the way a surgeon observes blood without flinching. You feel everything, but you are ruled by nothing. And when a person cannot be ruled by their own emotions, they become nearly untouchable. Because most manipulation happens through emotion: fear, urgency, guilt, hope, insecurity. When you are grounded in clarity, these tactics lose their teeth. You begin to see manipulation not as an attack but as information, evidence of what the other person wants, fears, or lacks. This emotional distance is what Machiavelli meant when he said a leader must learn to not be good, when goodness becomes a liability. It does not mean cruelty. It means you must not let emotional impulse determine the course of your life. It means you must not allow the world to move you like a piece on a board someone else is controlling. It means you choose your emotional expression with intention, with strategy, with precision. You decide what serves you. You decide what weakens you. You decide what strengthens your position. Once you operate from this place, panic becomes not only unnecessary, it becomes impossible. There is a moment you will experience as you internalize this philosophy, a moment where you suddenly feel the shift from being acted upon to becoming the one who acts. It often happens quietly, perhaps in a conversation where you remain composed while the other person rushes, stumbles, reveals more than they intended. Perhaps in a conflict where you feel your mind stay still while others react emotionally. Perhaps in a situation of uncertainty where instead of spiraling, you pause, observe, interpret. In that moment you realize that most people panic not because danger exists, but because they misinterpret uncertainty as danger. But you, now learning to read the deeper structure beneath behavior, see uncertainty as a signal pointing to advantage. Machiavelli understood that people reveal more of themselves under pressure than at any other time. Pressure strips away pretenses. It exposes true priorities, true allegiances, true fears. This is why he advised leaders to create controlled forms of pressure, to see who is loyal, who is weak, who is ambitious, who is deceptive. When a person is under stress, they stop hiding their nature. They stop performing. They stop posturing. What you see in those moments is the unvarnished truth of who they are, and a mind trained to read these moments can understand people more deeply in 30 seconds of stress than in 30 days of calm. Imagine watching someone react to a crisis. One person freezes, revealing their dependency on others to guide them. Another person lashes out, revealing their insecurity and fear of losing control. Another person becomes overly optimistic, revealing their denial mechanisms. Another person becomes calculating, revealing their ambition. You see all of this not through judgment but through analysis. Every react ion is a clue. Every emotion is a map. Every flicker of expression is data. When others panic, they scatter clues of their nature everywhere. And you, because you understand the game, collect these clues with quiet patience. This is the heart of strategic power. You learn people better than they know themselves. Once you learn them, you can predict them. Once you can predict them, you can influence them. Once you can influence them, you do not need to panic, ever. But to reach this level of clarity, you must examine yourself just as ruthlessly. You cannot read others if you remain blind to your own motives, fears, and impulses. Machiavelli would tell you that self-deception is the first chain you must break. Panic often comes not from external events, but from the collision between reality and the illusions you built about yourself. Perhaps you believed you were stronger or weaker than you actually are. Perhaps you believed someone cared more than they did. Perhaps you believed the world owed you fairness or predictability. These illusions crack under pressure, and panic spills out through the fractures. But when you strip away these illusions, when you shed the need to be comforted, you begin to experience a new kind of freedom, the freedom to interpret reality without distortion, the freedom to act with intention rather than reaction, the freedom to adapt quickly because you're not resisting the truth. And this adaptability is more powerful than any plan, any theory, any principle. Adaptability is the weapon of those who understand the game. Picture a battlefield, not of soldiers and swords, but of modern life, corporate politics, social dynamics, negotiations, relationships, competitions. The landscape constantly shifts. Alliances form and dissolve, opportunities open and close, people rise and fall. Those who cling to rigidity panic whenever the ground moves beneath them. But those who understand the game treat the shifting landscape as normal. They understand that uncertainty is permanent, that stability is temporary, that control is never guaranteed. They do not cling, they adjust. They do not freeze, they observe. They do not fear change, they use it as leverage. Machiavelli often wrote about the concept of fortune, the unpredictable forces of life that no one can control. He compared it to a river that floods unexpectedly, destroying everything in its path. Most people curse the river. He advised building channels and walls while the weather is calm. In other words, the wise do not wait for chaos to arrive before preparing. They strengthen their mind, their awareness, their resilience before the flood comes. That preparation, not external but internal, is what allows them to remain calm when others drown. And this is what you are beginning to build: internal fortification. Not the fortress of ego, which collapses under pressure, but the fortress of awareness, which does not. You are learning to remain centered even when circumstances destabilize. You are learning to delay reaction until you understand the full context. You are learning to watch, to analyze, to anticipate. You are learning how people expose themselves through their fears. And with each layer of understanding, panic slips further away from you, like a shadow losing shape in the shifting light. There is another truth Machiavelli understood deeply. The person who controls their image controls their fate. Panic destroys image. It signals weakness. It signals desperation. It signals lack of preparation. Those who understand the game cultivate an image of steadiness, even when they are navigating complex internal calculations. They do not flail. They do not broadcast vulnerability. They communicate competence through silence, confidence through posture, authority proof composure. People are naturally drawn to certainty, even when it is an illusion. And if you can embody certainty while others tremble, they will follow you, trust you, fear disappointing you, fear opposing you. This is not manipulation, it is strategy. The world is shaped by perception far more than truth. The calm person might be terrified internally, but their calmness becomes reality for everyone watching. The panicked person might have good intentions, but their panic becomes a contagious disease that destroys credibility. When you understand this, you begin to manage not just your emotions but your presentation. You begin to ask yourself, what story does my composure tell? What signal does my silence send? What impression does my reaction create? And in this questioning, you begin designing your influence. Now imagine you are confronted with a betrayal. Someone you trusted has turned their back on you. Once you would have panicked. You would have asked yourself what you did wrong, why this person changed, whether you could have prevented it. But now, with sharpened awareness, you interpret it differently. Betrayal is not a shock, it is data. It reveals more about the other person's motives, fears, or ambitions than it does about you. You analyze instead of collapsing. You observe instead of reacting. You track their reasons, their timing, their incentives. You trace the contradictions between what they said and what they did. And instead of panicking, you feel a cold clarity settling inside you. Their betrayal is not the end of your stability. It is the beginning of your advantage, because the person who betrays reveals their weakness, desperation, insecurity, or hunger for short-term gain. And once you know someone's weakness, they become predictable. And when someone becomes predictable, they lose power over you. Machiavelli would say that the worst NGA leader can do is allow themselves to be surprised. Panic is surprise exploding inside the mind. But when you understand people's nature, betrayal stops surprising you, weakness stops surprising you, hypocrisy stops surprising you. You begin to see that most people betray out of fear, not malice. They betray because they feel threatened, cornered, undervalued, or tempted by opportunities they do not have the patience to earn. When you understand this, you stop taking betrayal personally. You take it strategically. Imagine the power of this shift in your daily life. Someone insults you, you do not react. Someone provokes you, you do not flinch. Someone tries to intimidate you, you do not give them the satisfaction of emotional validation. Someone tries to rush you, you slow down. Someone tries to guilt you, you analyze their motive. Someone tries to blame you, you evaluate their incentives. Your composure becomes your shield, your silence becomes your weapon, your restraint becomes your strategic advantage. You begin to realize something profound. Panic is loud, but power is quiet. Panic scatters attention outward, power draws it inward. Panic reacts, power interprets. Panic exposes, power conceals. Panic fractures, power gathers. And as this truth takes root in you, your identity begins to change. You no longer see yourself as someone who merely survives uncertainty. You become someone who shapes it. You begin to anticipate emotional traps before they close. You sense power shifts long before they become visible. You detect insincerity in the microtones of a voice. You see manipulation in the timing of a request. You recognize insecurity in the exaggeration of confidence. You sense hidden agendas behind kindness that arrives too quickly. And through this heightened perception, you become something rare. A person who does not panic because they have no reason to, a person who does not fear chaos because they understand it. A person who does not tremble before uncertainty because uncertainty itself has become familiar. This is the path you are walking now, the path Machiavelli carved through centuries of human behavior, the path that leads away from blindness and into awareness, away from panic and into composure, away from illusion and into strategic clarity. And as you walk further, you will begin to feel the emergence of something deeper, not just calm, not just awareness, but control. Not control over the world, but control over yourself, the only domain where true power begins. You begin to feel it now, don't you? The subtle shift in the way you perceive the world, the way you watch people, the way your mind tracks patterns you once dismissed as coincidence or emotion. Something inside you has started to rearrange itself, not loudly, not dramatically, but with a quiet inevitability, like a shadow lengthening across the floor as evening approaches. There is no turning back from this shift, because once your eyes adjust to the darker truths of human behavior, the old light of innocence becomes blinding. You can no longer look at people the way you did before. You can no longer hear their words without listening to their motives. You can no longer interact without sensing the power dynamics beneath every gesture, every silence, every seemingly harmless exchange. Understanding the game changes you not through force, but through revelation, and revelation is irreversible. Machiavelli understood that the human mind is not born strategic. It becomes strategic through suffering, betrayal, observation, repetition, and a willingness to face truths that most people run from. You feel this evolution unfolding inside you. Your relationship with discomfort changes. Your relationship with uncertainty changes. You begin to experience something the calm that emerges not from peace, but from comprehension. You stop fearing the dark corners of human nature because you have learned to navigate them. You stop fearing other people's judgment because you know how much of it is projection. You stop fearing conflict because you see it for what it is, a negotiation of dominance disguised as disagreement. You stop fearing loss because you recognize that everything you cling to can be taken from you except your awareness. And this is the most dangerous awareness of all, the realization that control is not something you seize once. It is something you exert repeatedly, moment to moment, through perception, restraint, timing, and emotional discipline. This kind of control cannot be given to you. It must be forged, and it is forged through a painful process, the dismantling of every illusion you once depended on. Begin with the illusion that people think logically. They don't. The mind rationalizes, not reasons. It constructs stories after the fact, not before. It defends ego, not truth. When you understand this, you stop expecting logic from others. You stop trying to appeal to reason where reason does not live. Instead, you observe their fears, their desires, their insecurities. You learn that emotion is the engine of human behavior, and logic is merely the language we use to disguise that engine. And when a person hides something, what they hide reveals more than what they show. This is where your perception deepens. You no longer see arguments as disagreements. You see them as clashes of insecurity. You no longer see ambition as aspiration. You see it as hunger. You no longer see confidence as assurance. You see how often it is stitched together with fear. You begin to read the human spirit the way a seasoned navigator reads the sky, not for what is said, but for what is meant, not for the clouds themselves, but for the storm gathering behind them. Machiavelli knew that the person who sees beneath appearances becomes invulnerable to surprise. And invulnerability to surprise is invulnerability to panic. Most panic arises from shock, an unexpected betrayal, a sudden shift, a revelation you did not see coming. But once you understand the psychological machinery behind people's actions, betrayal becomes predictable, shifts become inevitable, revelations lose their bite. Not because the world becomes kinder, but because you become harder, more perceptive, more prepared. Think of a moment when someone erupted at you in anger. Once their reaction would have pierced you. You would have wondered what you did wrong, whether you failed, whether the relationship was collapsing. But now, you see the truth. Anger often reveals weakness, not strength. It reveals the pressure inside the other person, boiling over from sources they cannot control. Their anger at you may have nothing to do with you. It may be a response to their own failures, fears, or frustrations. This realization doesn't make you cold, it makes you discerning. You stop taking things personally. You stop giving others the power to destabilize you. You watch their outbursts with the same calm a chess player watches a reckless opponent move a piece without thinking. They reveal more than they intend, and you take note. This is how composure becomes influence. People trust the calm because they crave stability. They respect the calm because it signals strength. They fear the calm because it suggests calculation. They are drawn to the calm because it offers something they cannot generate within themselves. And if you can master this calm, not perform it but embody it, you become the kind of person others orbit around, whether they want to or not. But let's go deeper, because Machiavelli did not build his philosophy on observation alone. He built it on understanding the raw, uncomfortable truth about human loyalty. It is conditional. Always. People stay loyal as long as loyalty serves them, as long as they benefit, feel supported, feel seen, feel advantaged. But loyalty evaporates when fear, ambition, desire, or opportunity shifts. Once you understand this, you stop expecting devotion from those who cannot even maintain consistency with themselves. You stop giving trust blindly. You start treating loyalty not as a guarantee, but as a resource that must be managed, measured, tested, protected. This does not make you paranoid. It makes you awake. Imagine someone promising you loyalty. To the inexperienced mind, this promise feels secure. But to you, now trained by Machiavellian clarity, such a promise becomes information, not assurance. You ask, why promise now? What do they gain? What pressures are driving this commitment? What fear motivates their need to align? What would make them break this promise? Who else are they promising loyalty to? In these questions, you discover layers beneath their words. You discover that people often swear loyalty most intensely, not when they are loyal, but when they are afraid of losing your approval or your power. This understanding changes how you relate to people. You no longer cling to their promises. You observe their actions. You watch their reactions under pressure. You test their consistency. You wait to see whether they choose convenience or principle when both cannot coexist. And in that waiting, you gain control, not over them, but over your expectations. And when expectations are controlled, panic is eliminated at the root. Now consider the illusion of fairness. You were taught to expect fairness, to believe good intentions lead to good outcomes, that virtue guarantees reward, that effort ensures recognition. This illusion is the foundation of most man disappointment. Machiavelli burns it to the ground. He teaches that fairness is a myth constructed by those who benefit from your compliance. The world is not fair. It is not built to reward goodness or punish cruelty. It is built to reward effectiveness, strategy, timing, adaptability, the ability to navigate complexity without collapsing. Once you internalize this, you stop appealing to fairness. You stop waiting for justice. You stop assuming life owes you anything. You begin to rely on your own mind, not on the moral expectations you were fed. And in this shift, you become dangerous, not violent, not cruel, but insulated from manipulation. People cannot guilt you into submission when you no longer cling to being seen as good. People cannot pressure you through emotional chaos when you understand the motives behind it. People cannot destabilize you through unpredictability, because unpredictability becomes your teacher, not your tormentor. This mindset creates a new kind of internal power, not the power to dominate others, but the power to remain intact, in a world that constantly tests your stability, you begin to feel a profound groundedness. You feel a stillness beneath your ribs, as if your core has deepened. You speak less, but your words carry more weight. You hesitate less, because your decisions are clearer. You react slower, because your instincts are sharper. You stop explaining yourself to people who are not capable of understanding you. You stop seeking approval from those who have nothing to offer you. You stop giving your energy to situations that drain rather than sharpen you. But understand this, as your composure grows, you will unsettle people. Not enemies, everyone. Most people are accustomed to interacting with others who panic like they do, who react emotionally like they do, who reveal their internal chaos through expression and tone. When you do not panic, they do not know what to make of you. When you do not reveal your emotional state, they project onto you. When you remain silent, they begin to feel exposed. When you remain calm, they feel their own instability more intensely. Your presence becomes a mirror, reflecting their lack of control. And many people are more afraid of seeing themselves clearly than they are of chaos. Machiavelli knew this well. He understood that people fear what they cannot predict, and nothing is harder to predict than the person who has mastered their inner world. This is why the calm often appear intimidating, why their silence is interpreted as judgment, why their composure is mistaken for arrogance. People do not fear your lack of panic, they fear what your lack of panic implies, that you are operating from a level of awareness they cannot access. And the truth is, you are. This awareness deepens further when you begin to understand the illusion of equality in relationships, not social equality, not the political concept, but psychological equality, the idea that all relationships are balanced. They are not. One person always holds more influence, more emotional leverage, more narrative control. Sometimes subtly, sometimes aggressively. Most people ignore this dynamic because it makes them uncomfortable. But Machiavellian clarity demands acknowledgement. Once you recognize which role you occupy in each relationship, dominant or submissive, leader or follower, influencer or influenced, you begin to navigate interactions with intention rather than hope. Think of the last conversation you had where you felt unheard. Before, you would have blamed the other person for not listening. Now, you examine the power dynamic. Did they feel they had more status? Did they perceive your need for approval? Did you reveal insecurity through tone or wording? Did they benefit from disregarding you? In these questions, you find the root. When you understand power dynamics, you stop begging for respect and begin cultivating presence. You shift your posture, your tone, your timing. You speak less, you observe more. And gradually the dynamic shifts, not through force, but through psychological gravity. This gravity grows with your understanding of another illusion, the illusion that intentions matter more than results. They don't, not in the real world, not in power, not in influence, not in strategy. People judge you by what you achieve, not by what you meant to achieve. They evaluate your strength based on execution, not intention. And recognizing this does not corrupt you, it clarifies you. It removes the emotional burden of trying to be perceived as good, and replaces it with the drive to be effective. When you commit to results over intentions, panic dissolves because your mind stops drowning in self-doubt. You focus on action, not anxiety. You focus on outcomes, not excuses. You focus on what you can control, not on what you wish were different. This shift is liberating. You feel yourself stepping into a version of yourself you once believed only existed in movies or legends, the version who sees through deception, who moves with purpose, who interprets silence as clearly as words, who remains centered in conflict. You begin to sense how much power lies in patience, in timing, in letting others reveal themselves before you reveal anything of substance. You realize that most people rush not because of urgency, but because of insecurity. And you see that rushing is the gateway to panic. You no longer rush, you move with precision. This precision sharpens further when you understand the illusion of emotional transparency, the belief that others see your emotions as clearly as you feel them. They don't. Most people are not watching you, they are watching themselves. They do not see your fear, they see their projections. They do not see your insecurity, they see their assumptions. They do not see your internal struggle, they see your external composure. And if your external composure is steady, they assume strength, even when you are calculating internally. This is the foundation of strategic presence, but you take it deeper. You begin not only to manage your emotional presentation, but to control the emotional atmosphere of the room. This is something Machiavelli understood well: the power to influence without speaking, to dominate without force, to unsettle without aggression. You do this by embodying stability in environments where others expect chaos. Your calm becomes an anomaly, and anomalies draw attention. When others react emotionally and you do not, you become the point of contrast, and contrast creates hierarchy. Now imagine a scenario where everyone around you is uncertain: colleagues panicking over new changes, friends emotional about shifts, partners overwhelmed by fear. You sit quietly, observing the psychological landscape. You are not detached, you are calculating. You sense who is most afraid, who is pretending calm, who is seeking leadership, who is masking insecurity through aggression. And as you take all this in, something profound happens. You realize that the calmest person in the room becomes the leader by default. Not because they declare authority, but because stability is the rarest currency in chaos. You do not seize leadership, it drifts to you. This is the essence of Machiavellian strategy. The person who understands the game moves differently. They no longer need to force outcomes. They shape them subtly, through awareness, through restraint, through timing, through interpretation. Their influence rises not through noise but through mastery. And as your mastery deepens, you begin to understand the most important truth of all: panic is a symptom of being out of alignment with reality. When your expectations clash with truth, you panic. When your desires conflict with timing, you panic. When your illusions meet facts, you panic. But when you see reality clearly, when you understand human nature, power dynamics, emotional forces, incentives, weaknesses, ambitions, appearances, panic has no foundation left to stand on. You stand in the storm not because you are immune to fear, but because you understand fear's language. It speaks in patterns. You read them. It speaks in shadows. You navigate them. It speaks in silence. You interpret it. And because of this, you remain still while others crumble. You have begun to transform. The shadows lengthen as the game deepens. And by now you've begun to taste the truth Machiavelli never said outright, but etched between every line he ever wrote. That power is not a throne someone hands you, but a field of tension you must learn to breathe in. And so the thread pulls you deeper, into a darker corridor of the human mind where certainty erodes and instinct sharpens into something colder, something purer, something forged from understanding rather than hope. Because when you finally see the game for what it is, you realize panic is not a sensation, it is a verdict on the unprepared. And you, walking deeper into the labyrinth, no longer have the luxury of unpreparedness. You move through the dimly lit mental chamber Machiavelli carved for those willing to see without flinching. The air feels tight, heavy, as if charged with the weight of unspoken ambitions. And in this silent pressure, you begin to see the world as a battlefield of intentions. Every glance becomes a calculation, every word a negotiation, every silence a hidden blade. The deeper you walk, the more obvious it becomes that people are not mysterious, merely undiscovered. Their motives leak from them like light through cracks, if only you learn to read the fractures. The fourth movement of Machiavelli's truth begins here, in the recognition that power is sustained not by image or charisma or advantage, but by strategic composure. And strategic composure is born only when you understand the rhythm of the game, the rhythm of fear, the rhythm of ambition, the rhythm of betrayal, the rhythm of appearances shaping outcomes. It is the moment when the chaotic world around you stops being noise and becomes data, a pattern, a map, a pulse. Panic dies the moment understanding is born. But understanding is not passive. It is not watching from the sidelines with raised eyebrows and philosophical detachment. It is earned with your nerves, demanded by your instincts, extracted from you like a confession. Understanding requires a willingness to descend into the motives of others, even when those motives are darker than you wish to admit. Machiavelli understood this, perhaps more clearly than anyone of his time. Power was never sacred to him. It was a substance, a force, a weapon, and the first rule of wielding any weapon is to refuse to be afraid of it. You walk deeper, and the walls of the mental corridor shift, pulsing faintly like something alive. They reflect the human world, its betrayals, its smiles, its promises, its fractures. You see how easily people fracture. You see how quickly loyalty can evaporate. And you see, most importantly, how much of human behavior is dictated not by morality, nor loyalty, nor rationality, but by fear. Fear of loss, fear of insignificance, fear of humiliation, fear of exposure, fear of being outplayed. Fear is the invisible architect of human decision-making. Panic is simply fear forcing its way to the surface, and Machiavelli whispers through the growing tension. If you understand a person's fear, you understand their next move. If you understand their desire, you understand their blind spot. If you understand both, you hold their future in your hand long before they realize they've surrendered it. You pause, not because you're afraid, but because you recognize the shift within yourself, the shift from reacting to observing, from absorbing to interpreting. You begin to see people's actions not as insults, threats, or betrayals, but as symptoms, symptoms of their insecurity, symptoms of their ambition, symptoms of their hunger, symptoms of their weakness. And in that moment, your pulse steadies. Something in the center of your mind clicks into place. Panic dissolves like fog burned away by the sun. For the first time, perhaps in your entire life, you feel the thin layer between you and the world peel away. You are no longer inside the chaos. You are above it, watching it unfold with the cold clarity of a surgeon about to make the first incision. This is where Machiavelli's fourth revelation emerges. Panic belongs to those who mistake the world for something personal. Those who believe others act out of malice toward them, or goodness for them, or loyalty to them. But the world is never about you. It is about the river of motivations carrying every person where they must go, whether they wish to or not. Once you understand that, the fog clears. Once you understand that, you stop being surprised. Once you understand that, you stop being vulnerable to emotional manipulation. You stop mistaking noise for threat. You stop assuming intention where there is only instinct. And with that, something darker and more powerful awakens in you. You begin to recognize the architecture of influence that most people never see, the subtle pressure points that shape people's decisions long before they realize they have made them, the gentle pushes and carefully placed pauses that can steer a person's inner compass without them ever sensing the hand upon it. You understand that power is not in grand gestures or overwhelming force. Power is in the softest touch applied at the perfect moment, the shift of an eyebrow, the tone of a breath, the timing of a silence. True power is surgical, not theatrical. Composure grants you this precision. Panic ruins it. And so you learn to imitate the calm of the strategist even when your pulse wants to betray you. Because calm is not the absence of emotion. It is the domestication of emotion, the transformation of instinct into analysis, the hardening of vulnerability into perspective. Machiavelli understood this deeply. The truly powerful are not the ones who feel nothing, but the ones whose feelings never leak into their decisions. They bleed internally, silently, cleanly, and no observer ever sees the wound. You begin to remember moments in your own life, moments you panicked, moments you feared the future, moments you felt cornered, betrayed, overwhelmed, and suddenly they appear different in the dim light of this corridor. They look like puzzles you didn't know how to solve at the time, threats you didn't understand, moves you didn't recognize. You weren't powerless then. You were uninformed. You were untrained. You were reacting to shadows because you didn't yet know the shape of the predator casting them. Now you do. The more you understand the game, the more predictable people become. And once people become predictable, the world stops feeling dangerous. It starts feeling navigable, readable, negotiable. You begin to see power dynamics long before they snap into conflict. You sense tension before the first argument. You detect shifts in alliances before the first betrayal. You feel ambition rising in a room before anyone speaks it aloud. You begin to see the subtle ways people test you, and you learn to pass those tests not with arrogance, but with strategic silence. You begin to see how often people overplay their hands, and you learn to let them. You begin to see how vulnerability can be used deliberately, and you learn to wield it when necessary. You realize that people reveal their intentions most clearly when they think they are hiding them. And as you move deeper through the corridor, the air changes again. It becomes sharper, colder, as if inviting you into a deeper truth. Machiavelli demanded his readers uncover without ever stating it. Composure is not a performance. It is a weapon. A weapon forged from emotional discipline, strategic foresight, and the absolute refusal to surrender your center to external chaos. To be unshaken is to be ungovernable. To be ungovernable is to be unpredictable. To be unpredictable is to be dangerous. And danger, Machiavelli knew, is the language power respects. You begin to understand that composure is not about suppressing fear. It is about studying it. Fear becomes a tool, a compass, a radar, panic blinds. Fear informs. And you wield fear the way a general studies the movements of his enemy. You no longer ask, "What is happening to me?" You ask, "Why is this happening? Who benefits? What does this reveal? What does this confirm? What does this contradict? What has shifted?" These questions sharpen your mind. They dissolve uncertainty. They strip away the emotional noise most people drown beneath. They place you precisely where Machiavelli wanted you, at the vantage point where clarity eclipses panic, and the world's darker truths become not frightening, but useful. Because once you understand the game, a strange calm settles over you. You stop rushing. You stop forcing outcomes. You stop begging for clarity. Instead, you watch. You listen. You wait. You gather signals. You observe without attachment. You see the moving parts. You notice the invisible hinges. You understand that everything unfolds according to the motives of the players. And once you understand the motives, you understand the inevitable. The inevitable does not frighten those who recognize it. You feel the corridor approaching its next turn, its next descent, its next revelation. The air pulses with anticipation, thick with possibility. And you sense that you are not walking blindly anymore. You are navigating, choosing, interpreting. You are no longer the person who once panicked at shadows. You are the one who studies them, interprets them, deciphers their meaning before they even reach you. This is the transition Machiavelli wanted his students to undergo, from participant to observer, from observer to strategist, from strategist to architect. Power belongs not to those who react, but to those who perceive, those who anticipate, those who understand, and step by step, breath by breath, realization by realization, you feel yourself becoming one of them. The corridor ahead darkens, beckoning with deeper truths yet to be revealed, and you walk forward not because you must, but because you are ready. You feel the shift before you understand it, a quiet thickening of the air, a tightening of the unseen strings that run through the corridors of power, a sensation that the architecture around you is preparing to reveal something heavier, darker, more intimate than anything shown before. This is where the game stops being theoretical. This is where Machiavelli world stops feeling like an idea and becomes a mirror, one that reflects not only the nature of others, but the nature you've tried hardest to ignore. And as the shadows stretch, you begin to sense the presence of a truth that has been stalking you since the first step. Understanding the game does not only eliminate panic, it fundamentally transforms who you are allowed to become. The walls pulse like a living artery, each beat echoing the tension of a world built on hidden intentions. You see now that humans move through life like constellations of emotion, shaped by wounds, anchored by desire, driven by fear, yet convinced they are acting from logic and principle. You see the threads behind their choices, the scars behind their pride, the tremors beneath their anger. And with every realization, your role shifts again. You are no longer simply interpreting people. You are navigating through them, learning the currents, sensing the tides, calculating the eye. Inevitable collisions. And deeper still, Machiavelli's voice threads through your mind like a low current. The greatest advantage in any conflict is not strength, nor intelligence, nor courage. It is understanding. Understanding the landscape of motives. Understanding the fragility of alliances. Understanding the volatility of emotions. Understanding the blindness of ego. Understanding the hunger that drives people into self-made traps. You begin to see this hunger everywhere, in the tremble behind someone's confidence, in the exaggerated laugh of someone eager for approval, in the silence someone holds too long, in the aggression meant to mask insecurity, in the kindness meant to conceal manipulation, even in the loyalty meant to purchase security. Human beings radiate their neediness without realizing they do. And the more attuned you become to this frequency, the more predictable the world seems. You wonder how you could have missed it all before. The corridor curves, narrowing, as if squeezing you between the truths you've already faced and the ones you've been avoiding. For a moment, you feel the weight of your own past decisions pressing in. Moments where you hesitated, moments where you surrendered ground without knowing it, moments where you feared loss instead of understanding positioning. You see your old self clinging to certainty, reacting to pressure, mistaking emotion for insight. And it feels like looking at a stranger. Someone naive, someone untrained, someone who believed a world played fair simply because they wanted it to. But the world has never played fair. It plays true, true to human nature, true to hidden fears, true to silent ambitions. And if you are willing to understand those truths without flinching, you become something rare, someone unmanipulable, someone who cannot be thrown off center, someone who refuses to drown in the waves of CR. Eyes is because you have learned to read the tides beneath them. The corridor opens into a vast chamber, dimly lit by a light that comes from nowhere and everywhere. It feels ancient, as though generations of ambition have carved its shape. And in this space you understand the next layer of the game. Power does not truly come from domination or fear or ruthlessness. It comes from predictability. Specifically, the predictability of others contrasted with the unpredictability of yourself. People who panic telegraph their entire play. Their emotions write their strategy for them. Their reactions reveal their weaknesses. Their need for certainty makes them easy to corner. But someone who stays centered, someone who breathes where others tighten, who observes where others accuse, who waits where others rush, becomes impossible to read, impossible to anticipate, impossible to defeat. Machiavelli understood that power depends on asymmetry. The ruler who knows his court better than they know him cannot be overthrown. The citizen who understands his leaders better than they understand him cannot be controlled. The strategist who knows the fears of his opponents better than they know his cannot be outmaneuvered. In this chamber, you begin to feel that asymmetry shifting toward you. You move slowly, as though walking through a field of invisible strings connecting every decision you've ever made to every outcome you never understood. You feel them tug gently, a reminder that the past was not a series of accidents, but a landscape you were simply not trained to navigate. Now, though, the landscape looks different. What once felt like chaos now curls into pattern. What once felt like betrayal now reveals motive. What once felt like pressure now unfolds into opportunity. And somewhere deep inside you, a question surfaces. Not the kind that demands panic or fear, but the kind that sharpens your focus. What would your life look like if you treated every situation as a strategic landscape instead of an emotional battlefield? The chamber breathes around you, almost expectantly, as though waiting for your answer. And you begin to imagine it. You picture yourself walking into rooms without the tension of proving yourself, because you understand everyone else is too preoccupied with their own narratives to truly judge yours. You picture a world where silence becomes your ally, where patience becomes your shield, where timing becomes your sword. You picture yourself no longer reacting to hostility but studying it, no longer fearing uncertainty but interpreting it, no longer losing sleep over betrayal but recognizing it as inevitable, manageable, even predictable. And as these images sharpen, you recognize another Machiavellian truth forming in the periphery. Power favors those who remain emotionally neutral in situations designed to provoke emotional reaction. The game is built on goading people into revealing themselves, losing their center, dropping their mask, exposing their vulnerability. When you refuse to take the bait, when you remain composed in moments designed to unhinge you, you become the one who shapes the terrain. Control the terrain, and you control the outcome. You sense another shift in the chamber, as though you've triggered a mechanism hidden beneath the floor. The temperature drops. Shadows stretch long and skeletal against the walls. The silence thickens into a kind of pressure that weighs on your lungs. And for the first time you feel the presence of something immense, something that has been waiting for you to arrive at this level of awareness. This presence is not a voice, not a figure, not a ghost. It is a realization that the higher you rise in understanding, the more isolated the vantage point becomes. Becker. Most people do not want to understand the game. They want to feel safe within it. They want reassurance, not clarity. They want predictability, not strategy. They want comforting illusions, not uncomfortable truths. But you have chosen truth. And truth has its price. You feel the chamber tightening again, closing in like a fist around your sense of self. It presses against your old identities, your old fears, your old assumptions, compressing them until they crack under the weight of the newer, sharper self you are becoming. And with every crack, you feel lighter, colder, clearer, more dangerous. Because once you understand human nature at its most fundamental level, you stop being surprised by anything. And when nothing surprises you, nothing controls you. You breathe calmly, deeply, slowly. The chamber seems to inhale with you, as though mirroring your newfound steadiness. And in that breath, you realize something startling. Composure is not simply a tool for survival, it is a tactic for dominance, a tactic that allows you to redirect the flow of interactions, shape perceptions, manipulate tempo, and orchestrate outcomes without appearing to do anything at all. Strategic calm is invisible, but its effects are seismic. A person who does not panic is assumed to know something others do not. This assumption alone shifts the balance of power. People project strength onto you, wisdom onto you, control onto you. They begin to reveal themselves more openly, trying to understand your unreadable calm. They second-guess their own moves. They hesitate, they overshare, they overthink. All while you remain still at the center of the storm, watching, analyzing, preparing. The chamber vibrates faintly, a resonance that feels both warning and promise. You sense you are approaching the next descent, the moment where understanding becomes something deeper, something more dangerous, something irreversible. You feel the presence of every lesson you've absorbed tightening around you like armor, the understanding of fear, the mastery of timing, the awareness of human hunger, the neutrality of emotion, the calm that replaces panic, the unpredictability that replaces vulnerability. You feel the next truth rising from the floor, from the walls, from the tension between your breaths. And you know that what awaits in the next movement is not simply knowledge, it is transformation. You feel the moment before it arrives, the shift in the air, the tightening of the unseen threads, the way the entire corridor of your mind seems to contract around something immense, something final, something inevitable. The echoes of every step you've taken through this dark architecture of strategy gather behind you like a silent army, watching, waiting, ready to see whether you will cross the last threshold or turn back into the familiar darkness of who you used to be. Because this last chamber is not about understanding others. It is about confronting the one opponent who has been shaping your fate long before you knew there was a game being played, yourself. The corridor narrows until it is barely wide enough for your breath to pass through. The walls ripple as though made not of stone but of memory, bending inward, showing flashes of your past as if projected through a cracked lens, moments of hesitation that cost you leverage, moments of emotional surrender disguised as love, moments of rage that exposed your vulnerabilities, moments where you begged for clarity instead of crafting it, moments where you let fear dictate your choices instead of dissecting it like a specimen on a cold table. The corridor forces you into confrontation with the version of you that panicked, the version of you that reacted instead of observed, the version of you that mistook noise for threat and threat for fate, the version of you that lived as if the world was something happening to you instead of something responding to you. It hurts to look at that version of yourself. It hurts because you know it isn't gone. It's still breathing somewhere inside you, waiting for a moment of weakness to reappear. That weak self is a shadow you spent years feeding with doubt, with guilt, with misplaced hope, with false narratives about your own limitations. And the shadow watches you now with dark, trembling eyes, desperate to survive, because it knows something you don't want to admit. If you walk through the next door, it will die. The thought sends a flicker of fear through you, but it is not the old chaotic fear. It is the sharp, metallic fear of irreversible transformation, the fear of shedding a skin you have worn for so long that it has fused to your identity. But Machiavelli's whisper threads through your mind like cold wind slicing through silk. Transformation is not a choice. It is the price of understanding. You step forward. The corridor widens into a circular chamber, carved from what looks like black marble, but feels like something much older, something that predates civilization, predates ambition, predates even fear. It feels like the raw material from which human nature itself was sculpted. The silence here is total, not empty, but full, heavy, like a hand pressing against your chest. Every sound you've heard throughout this journey dies here, swallowed as though the room itself demands reverence. In the center of the chamber stands a single reflective surface, not glass, not metal, not water, something else, something alive. It shudders faintly, like breath moving through a creature sleeping beneath the surface. You realize with a slow rising tremor that this surface doesn't reflect your appearance, it reflects your state, your esse, your structure, your sovereignty, your weakness. You approach it. The surface ripples at your presence, and for a moment you see yourself as you appear to the world, calm, composed, sharpened by understanding. But as you draw closer, the image distorts, fractures, reshapes. It begins stripping away your performed strength, your practiced composure, your learned strategy. It begins carving down through the layers you've built to protect yourself, peeling back every strategy you've adopted, every mask you've worn, every illusion of control you've projected. It shows you the truth beneath the truth, and what you see is not shameful, it is unfinished. Machiavelli understood something almost no one wants to accept, that people do not fear the unknown. They fear the parts of themselves they have never met, the parts they denied, the parts they suppressed, the parts they silenced because the world taught them to be smaller than their instincts, quieter than their ambitions, safer than their potential. You see all of those parts now, swirling in the reflective surface like dark smoke illuminated by a pale light, your hunger for stillness, your hunger for control, your hunger for understanding, your hunger for consequence. The part of you that never belonged in chaos but never understood how to escape it. The part of you that wanted to lead but didn't know where to start. The part of you that sensed betrayal but lacked the language to articulate it. The part of you that feared power because you feared what it might demand of you. The surface begins to vibrate harder, as though reacting to your acknowledgement, as though urging you to admit the truth hiding behind these revelations. You have been playing this game without knowing its deepest rule. The rule is simple. Power is not taken. Power is recognized. And panic is simply what happens when you refuse to reckon. Eyes the power already forming within you. The room shudders, and a low resonant hum fills the air, a sound that feels like it's emanating from the bones of the world. You step even closer, and the surface splits into two overlapping images, the version of you who knew nothing of the game, and the version of you who knows too much to ever return to that innocence. The difference between them is not intelligence, it is not privilege, it is not luck, it is posture. The first version reacts to forces, the second shapes forces. The first version fears collapse, the second studies collapse. The first believes the world judges them, the second understands the world reveals itself to them. The first panics at uncertainty, the second thrives within it. You understand now, fully and painfully, why panic disappears when you understand the game, because understanding places you above the line where ordinary people drown. The surface folds inward, as though swallowing your reflection, and in its place a new image emerges. One you have not yet earned but are being invited to consider. An image of yourself standing at the center of conflict, with cold steadiness in your eyes. An image of yourself navigating betrayal, not with despair, but with analysis. An image of yourself stepping into chaos, with the posture of someone who knows exactly where every piece on the board is going to land before the players even realize the game has begun. It is not a fantasy, it is a blueprint. The room grows darker. The surface begins to glow with a deep, molten light, as though heated from within by something volcanic, something ancient. And in that glow you feel the final truth rising, the truth that every strategist must absorb if they want to step beyond survival and into mastery. Understanding the game gives you clarity. Mastering the game gives you composure. But becoming the game gives you power. This final transformation is not about predicting people. It is not about anticipating moves. It is not about controlling outcomes. It is about becoming the axis around which outcomes revolve. It is about embodying such unwavering internal order that external disorder cannot breach you. It is about cultivating such emotional sovereignty that no one can shake your center. It is about building such psychological depth that you can walk through chaos without losing orientation. Machiavelli never said this outright because he knew the truth would only reach those prepared to understand it. The ultimate power is not dominion over others, it is dominion over self. The chamber begins to tremble. The reflective surface ruptures into light. The entire room fills with blinding heat and sound, as though the structure of your mind is collapsing around you. But you do not flinch. You do not panic. You stand in the center of the collapse like a figure rooted in stone, because you know now that collapse is not destruction. It is restructuring. It is clearing the ground for a stronger foundation. It is erasing the architecture of your old identity to make space for the strategist you are becoming. The light swallows everything. For a moment, there is nothing. Then the chamber reforms around you, wider, larger, more illuminated, as though it was waiting for you to grow enough to fill it. You feel no tension now, no hesitation, no doubt. Only a dense, quiet clarity settling into your bones like new gravity. You realize something profound. You have not been learning Machiavelli's philosophy. You have been becoming it. And with that realization, the chamber opens. A doorway appears, a final threshold carved from shadow and silence. Beyond it lies the world, unchanged in its cruelty, unchanged in its deception, unchanged in its hunger, unchanged in its chaos. But you are no longer the same person walking into it. You have learned to see people without their masks. You have learned to hear motives beneath words. You have learned to navigate chaos with surgical calm. You have learned to detach emotion from decision. You have learned to anticipate conflict before it forms. You have learned to master the terrain instead of reacting to it. You have learned to understand the game so deeply that panic cannot reach you anymore. And as you step toward the threshold, the whisper of Machiavelli returns, no longer a distant guide, but a voice aligned with your own. Power belongs to those who are no longer afraid of themselves. You place your hand on the doorway. The world waits. And in this final moment, you understand that everything you have learned in these dark, echoing corridors leads to one simple truth that demands action, demands movement, demands transformation. If you do not claim authorship over your life, someone else will. If you do not lead your mind, the world will lead it for you. If you do not master your instincts will master you. If you do not dominate your emotions will expose you. If you do not understand the game will devour you. So step forward. Step into the world with your new clarity. Step into conflict without fear. Step into opportunity without hesitation. Step into your power without apology. Because now you do not simply understand the game. You are ready to play it. Coldly, calmly, deliberately, ruthlessly. And win.